everybody, and welcome to Ventures and Visionaries, Episode 8, Sustainable Scaling. I'm your host, Mordy. I'm an entrepreneur, business founder, strategic consultant, people developer, and problem solver. The podcast is about people, entrepreneurship, and business innovation. How do these different areas contrast and complement? And especially, how do we create leverage and multiplication? Today, my guests are Roy Peter and Larry Garcia. Roy is a professional EOS implementer, and Larry is the co-founder of Strety. I'll get to that in a moment. Roy, my professional EOS implementer, over 20 years of experience in the technology industry. He's passionate about creating sustainable work cultures that align people, processes, and goals. He successfully applied the EOS tools and principles to businesses in construction, technology, and professional services, increasing their revenue by over 10x and transforming them to industry leaders. Roy, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you, Mordy. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
It's my pleasure. Larry, the co-founder of Strety. Larry has also co-founded another company, which is when I met him a long time ago. He's an experienced go-to-market expert in the SaaS industry in prior lives. Larry worked in finance and was even a public school teacher in the inner city. Larry is an experienced chief revenue officer with a demonstrated history in working in the internet industry, skilled in sales, sales management, public speaking, and Spanish. Hola, Larry.
Buenas, Mordy. ¿Cómo estás?
I don't speak any Spanish.
All right. How you doing, Mordy? How's it going?
I'm doing great. Guys, I'm super excited about today's show. I love the high level of growing businesses, and I love the subtext of using a particular same aligned tool for growing that business. And that would be EOS and Strety, that both align with this framework that can help businesses grow. And hopefully the people that listen will gain some knowledge. So maybe we'll start quickly with Roy. Maybe give us a few minutes both on, on yourself and on EOS.
Okay, sure. Roy Peter, based in New York. I've been in the technology field for the better part of 20 years, building and growing companies with a background in management and psychology. I've always been fascinated with what drives people, what drives businesses to greatness, right? And in my journey, I found that when you get extremely talented people aligned around a common vision, magic happens. Now, why EOS? In one of my last ventures, I was growing at a company that was rapidly growing, and we had hit an abrupt ceiling. After rapidly expanding, from 15 to 65, 70 employees, becoming one of the top producers in the industry, no matter what we did, we couldn't break through this ceiling. Comes cue EOS. We heard about EOS, we bought the book, we read the book, tried to implement a set of tools, didn't quite make as much traction as we intended to, and then we hired an implementer. Completely blown away. Leadership teams became very aligned. We were very on point with our priorities, and we learned how to problem solve. So much so that I used EOS as an integrator, as a user for 3 years within that company. And we started to scale to new heights. It was then that I realized I found my second calling in life, which was to be an EOS implementer. Because what EOS does is it helps companies with vision, traction, and healthy. Vision from the standpoint of getting everyone aligned with where you're going and how you're going to get there. Traction by creating accountability and discipline so that everyone is rowing in the same direction. And finally, healthy, because let's face it, most leadership teams are not healthy. Healthy means creating cohesive, collaborative teams so you enjoy what you're doing again, right? So much so that everyone is rowing towards the same direction. You have a healthier company and everyone is happy accomplishing the same vision.
That sounds wonderful. Happy and healthy. I love it. Larry, maybe give us a little bit of a background on you and on your current venture.
Yeah, so Larry Garcia with Strety. So, like you said, I started out of college in finance, and then took my way to being an inner city, civics and economics teacher in Miami, and then joined my good friend Brian, who's my co-founder of Strety here at Brightgauge, and we grew that in sort of the MSP IT industry that Mordy we know each other from. And that was a huge success for us. And then, yeah, it was an incredible journey for us. And then sort of tying in our EOS story was, we read the book back in 2014. One of our customers gave it to us at a conference. And I would say the two transformational things for us was doing EOS. We self-implemented back then. And then the second one was doing one-on-one meetings. So those two things, you can see sort of the revenue change for us and really grew the company from there on out. And then now moving on to Strety, this is sort of our appreciation and love letter of what EOS or a framework did for us. And so it's anywhere like a business operating system, right? So you want to do actions, but how do you keep them, accountable and intertied to to-dos, issues, what's, the vision for the company, like Roy was mentioning. So that's what we do.
These are obviously very complicated things to be doing on a regular basis to be able to track both your goals as well as how you get to those actions. Seems like
Exactly.
You both agree. Roy, maybe talk to us a little bit more in depth for those of us who don't really understand, a little bit more on the core of the framework of EOS.
So the beauty about EOS is, and I've looked at many different frameworks, right? And I've looked at companies, when companies are thriving and they're growing, right? What they're trying to do is they're trying to expand market share by getting better people to do what they can do, right? Delegate and elevate. What EOS does is it packages it neatly, right? EOS has strategic planning built into it. There's a component in terms of finding and getting the right people in the right seats so that it is much more cohesive in terms of how teams work towards their goals using the right data, right? Using data intelligently so that you are able to see, are you headed towards your right direction? Do you need to course correct? One of the most important things that EOS teaches you also is problem solving, and that's prioritizing problems. Every business has problems. Which do you prioritize? Which do you solve now? Which do you keep for later? Are they really issues? Getting down to root causes, right? So EOS packages it in such a way where the 6 components of your business all speak to each other, right? And when you learn the tools in EOS, what it does is it smokes out issues within the business. And I have all my clients within the first 60 to 90 days go, oh my God, I have all these issues. Is this meant to happen? And we go, yes. This is meant to bring everything to the surface and then allow you to prioritize what you need to focus on. Hopefully that gives you a sense of what EOS is.
It certainly does. Thank you so much, Roy. Larry, you not only are building software that helps people work with us, but as you mentioned, when you worked with Breakage, you were running some form of a flavor of EOS. Can you maybe speak as a consumer of the framework as to how that was helpful to you?
Yeah, we started what we called, we stopped doing firefighting by the water cooler. So, the leadership team for us, there was 4 of us and 2 of us would meet up and there was a problem and we try to solve it right then and there. That framework really put for us, all right, there was a time and place to talk about it together as a team. And that meant not only at the leadership team, but at the sales team level, service team, product team. And so it made it so that a lot of people were working on the same problem. And we always caught that we thought 2 people would be a part of a problem. There was a third that was affected by it, right? Or had some input that was insightful. So that as a consumer of the framework was super powerful for us. And then also just, we had in our sort of gut minds or, around a beer or a glass of wine of what we wanted the company to become. But to actually sit there and say, all right, let's flush this out. Let's write this out of what it is, right? And then work backwards. What do we need to get there? That was something that was a discipline we just hadn't done. We had sort of a crazy goal in mind, but to sit there and kind of work through it, on our scribble, on our traction book, which is where the EOS framework comes from, that was super powerful for us. So as a consumer, it was day and night. It was becoming a disciplined person and putting a process in place.
A time and place for everything, and being able to ensure that the people that are impacted and affected by the decisions and plans that you make actually are looped in properly.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Roy, maybe you have any stories in a similar vein of people who have gone through a process like this, who have experienced similar types of benefits.
Absolutely. A particular client comes into mind, thriving business, probably considered the top of their industry in New York City. promotions-based company, and what they had was they had a great product, right? They had excellent teams. Unfortunately, the structuring of the business was not as clear, right? Decision making had quite a few number of complications in terms of people really knowing what am I accountable for? What am I allowed to make decisions for, right? Which are, what can or can I not do? I don't want to step on people's toes, right? So what EOS did for them is as they continued to grow, it started to make the roles very clear, roles and responsibilities, and also measures of success. What was unclear before was what is considered successful and what is not. What do we want to duplicate, right? And in terms of productivity, which are those initiatives that we need to focus on right now? This company started to, it has continued to grow 20%, about 20 to 25% growth, continued growth since starting EOS. And I think the people in leadership are much happier because they're clearer about their roles. Clearly, there are some changes in terms of roles and structuring, who does what. Initially, it's a little uncomfortable, but in the long term, it adds clarity to that vision. Who do I have best on the team to help us accomplish what we need to? Who can lead, who can manage, and who are those specialized SMEs that are perfect doing what they need to do and are content doing those things? It's about finding a place for everyone.
And that really sounds like having a framework helps get everybody, once again, aligned and understanding where they're allowed to go to and perhaps not beyond, or sometimes ask forgiveness.
It's more, I don't believe in asking for forgiveness. I call it career pathing, right? Once you create a structure that is transparent and clear and you show team members what the opportunities exist within a company, a person in shipping can clearly one day aspire to be in engineering or in production or in sales, right? If you show them a clear path, here's the career paths to success. You do these things extremely well. These are the priorities within your area of expertise. Continue to accomplish them. You will elevate, and there will be other opportunities open up to you, right?
Right.
The world's your oyster when EOS is made transparent. You go as far as you want to.
So from a team growth perspective, Larry, you've obviously scaled a business to an exit, and now you're on take 2, maybe 3. Maybe you can speak to our listeners who are interested in learning about how to scale a business from the teamwork perspective that Roy is talking about. Were there benefits to the framework that you can speak to, both from experience as well as any other insights that you'd want to share?
Yeah, I think as far as scaling a business, one thing that always comes to mind is that there isn't a magic bullet, right? There isn't a magic thing you do and it's super easy and you scale, right? I almost think of the word traction a little bit as like an onomatopoeia, right? Where like the word bang, right? It sounds like it. And traction has these consonants where it's like a grinding sound, right? And I think by putting in the framework, you're getting that, all right, we're grinding a little bit. There's a little bit of friction. You're uncovering problems that have been, taken to the surface, right? Maybe there's some minor politics between, the person who is the leader, but also thinks that they're the COO, mm-hmm. right? And maybe those are two different roles. And I think uncovering those things is helpful. And the reason that helps for scale is because once you get the sunshine on it, right, and you take it to the top, then you say, all right, let's solve those problems. And when those are cleared out, okay, let's start hiring people, right? Because it's really hard to hire people and throw them into a place where there's a lot of friction going on, internal politics and stuff like that. But once you get through that traction period and you say, all right, we kind of figured out what's wrong. How are we going to get traction in here? Now you start hiring people. And I think the hiring people thing was a huge component. So I know at the beginning of the show, I mentioned one-on-ones were massive for us. I think that they're super important. I don't necessarily recommend it once a week. I think that's a little bit too quick, but we had a weird cadence. We used to meet every 3 weeks. That gave you 18 meetings a year, but it gave you sort of enough time for the manager and direct report to have a lot of content to talk about. And for scaling,
I'm gonna do something that may create a little bit of tension in this conversation. Larry, you said that you're working off of EOS not exactly the way it's meant to be. And I believe, Roy, you're very much in favor of maintaining a strict schedule. So, Roy, maybe you can address the tension between finding the unique differences in a company's culture, what works for you as you're scaling, versus, um, the recipe, if you will, that's actually outlined in the book and in the teachings.
Sure. So in EOS, like what we do is we train the trainers, right? We train leadership teams. Our goal is to get the leadership teams to master EOS so that they can successfully adopt it within their verticals or within the organization as a whole. Now, I've done this. We've done this. Like I'm guilty as charged. In 2016, when we read EOS, when we read Traction, we bought 6 copies for each director, and lo and behold, the reason why we had problems was because we were trying to modify EOS to suit our operations. I mean, mind you, we were one of the top producers, and Mordy, you and I have worked together for the better part of 19 years, right? We were one of the top producers in the tri-state, if not country. And here we are, we're like, we know better. We're going to take EOS, the framework, and adopt it to our fashion. And so instead of focusing on 5 issues, we had 37 issues we were trying to solve. Instead of having an effective meeting within the time period allotted, we were having it in 2-3 hours. So the effectiveness of the system started to lose its ability. It wasn't until we hired an external accountability partner, bringing in an implementer, and he goes, do you want to learn EOS or do you want to learn your system? Because I don't know your system. I'm here to teach you EOS. It works. It runs in 24,000 companies. So when you buy a high performance machine, when you buy a Lamborghini, you're not going to try and take it off-roading because you enjoy off-roading. You're going to use it as a high performance machine to get you from point A to point B in the most exciting, fastest way possible. In the same fashion, or what at least our application at EOS, our problem was trying to modify a system to suit our needs, not us modifying to follow EOS to get to the goals we wanted. So I'm a big believer of structure. I've tried it both ways. In my experience, it's about creating accountability and teaching leaders to be accountable, because how could you expect your team members to be accountable if you're not willing to be accountable yourself?
And the truth is, Roy, I hear that. And in my own experience, I will say that sometimes sticking to the strict letter of the process works perfectly well. And sometimes, no matter how many times you bang your head against that process, it still doesn't work. In our case, there have been situations where the process just really doesn't quite work. And we've had to modify as well. So it sounds more like what Larry was saying, that, if the one-on-ones don't happen quarterly, they need to, and they can't happen weekly. So they need to happen on some other cadence. Larry, do you have any other examples of exceptions to the framework that you found work better just for your culture and your business?
Yeah, at Breakage, and I would say now at Strety that we're self-implementing pretty much as to the letter as we can. For another business that my co-founder was a part of, we actually used an implementer, and that was in a low voltage cabling business, and that was the right need because of internal management that there needed to be a third party in there. And that was fantastic. I would say in the Breakage days, and again, we're talking 2014, so this is a decade ago, right? This is before How to Be a Great Boss, a lot more content that's come out from EOS around the individual employee. I would say we think about not necessarily as, off-roading with the Lamborghini, but like adding tints and maybe changing the tail a little bit. One was the quarterly reviews. Now we do the quarterly reviews, definitely. But back then, people wanted it annually, right? Because they wanted it around a conversation around compensation. And so we would do the annuals, and that's why we supplanted that with the 3-week one-on-one meeting cadence, which really is the same page meeting that you would have, or the 555. So it's that was a little bit of the nuance. I think on the team side, on the vision side, on the rocks, how you run meetings, that we pretty much stuck to the framework, but we added a little bit of flavoring onto our thing, where again, just feedback from employees, and again, that was a decade ago. So.
Right.
And Mordy, may I just add one point?
Please.
If you are following the framework as how it's set forth, and you're having challenges following the framework, there is an issue there. There is a deep-rooted issue. There is something else going on that I challenge you to figure out, right? It might be an accountability issue. It might be a process issue. It might be roles, right? There's something else going on. And so if anything about EOS that's powerful, it's that IDS. Really get down to that root cause. What's really going on here, right? I just thought I'd add that in.
I think that that's a very wise observation, right? So we all either don't recognize or sweep under the rug the problems that we can't understand or don't want to deal with. So what winds up happening is, in that scenario, Roy, you're right. We hide it, or we move it elsewhere. I'll also note that from my perspective on the EOS system, when we implemented it, Larry, you spoke about a couple of massive game changers. For us, the L10 meetings was a game changer.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Would either of you want to opine about, the structure of a meeting and how that's supposed to work? Maybe I'll let Roy go quickly, and Larry add in some color as well.
Sure. So the level 10 meeting is a 90-minute meeting which you have weekly with your leadership team members. It is very structured in its fashion. In the beginning, you transition from working in the business to working on the business. And then you go through a process spending 15 minutes of reporting, purely reporting, no discussing, no debating. You're simply looking at the business. Did you hit your goals? Did you hit your rocks? Are you in progress? Yes, no. And then you spend a big chunk of the meeting looking at IDS. But before you go into IDS, there is a level of accountability that you go around the room. You're looking eyeball to eyeball with each other. Did you deliver on your promises from last week? If you didn't, is there an issue here? How can we help you solve this? How do we move the ball forward? Then you spend a big chunk of your time IDSing, prioritizing the biggest and most important issues and solving them at the root cause. Now, a lot of companies solve issues with no actionable items. In EOS, we say you cannot solve an item if you do not have the best next available step, the next best action step, which we call a to-do. And you need to have an owner to that action step. You don't leave that meeting until you have an owner. You do all of this while sticking to the time. You start on time, you end on time, and you rate the quality of the meeting, because the goal is to continuously get better, week in, week out.
Wow, that sounds incredibly powerful. I know it was for us. Larry, how was an L10 implementation work for you? Any color you want to add?
Oh gosh, I mean, a complete game changer for us. I mean, it really changed, and I think the most powerful thing for us was the accountability thing Roy was talking about, of like, did you get your stuff done from the previous meeting? And it was really messy. First quarter was really messy. There was a lot of people scrambling and a lot of people looking at the top left corner of the conference room of, oh yeah, something's going on. It's like, you didn't even remember that you had to do that, did you? And so that transition was hard, but going into Q2, Q3, we started hitting a cadence, and we saw the same thing play out when we moved it down to other departments, was that accountability step. Roy, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Gino talk about that it's like a heart pulse? Because initially when you do it, people don't do stuff. And so like all the to-dos, all the actions done right before the meeting.
Exactly. Like right now, it becomes a cadence, a pulse for your meeting, right? It's the most important meeting in your organization, both at the top level, because, each of you manages different parts of your business. When you come together effectively, one, it's the most expensive meeting in the company on a per minute charge. So you've got to use every single minute efficiently and make it productive, right? So Gino calls it a cadence because it becomes the heartbeat of your company, right? Every week when you meet, week in, week out, are you doing well? Are you not doing well? Which parts are you having an embolism? Are you having an arrhythmia? What do you need to do? Do you need to see a doctor? Do you need to kind of cut down on the carbs and start exercising?
Those are wonderful. I'm just going to interject here with two housekeeping items quickly. The first one is IDS, stands for Identify, Discuss, and Solve. Rocks are big company quarter goals. Roy and Larry can explain that better than I can. And the other item that we spoke about in L10 would be a level 10 meeting. So for those of us who don't know what those means, I just wanted to quickly interject.
Thank you, Mordy.
Every I've discovered as an IT guy that I very quickly slip into jargon, and it's very hard to not. Well, I'll say it like this: it's easier to speak with your mnemonics and shorthand than it is to speak longhand. But by the same token, the people who don't understand just don't understand. I know that Larry has experience in business intelligence to help people understand complicated concepts in a simple format, and I've had the benefit of using the tools that he's created. Maybe speak a little bit about the ideas about how we communicate complicated information in a simple way, and how do you go about that, both in Breakage and in Strety?
Yeah, I think in the sort of business intelligence past and all that stuff was that there was a lot of action going on in the business, but it wasn't surfaced. It almost goes back to the whole, surfacing problems at the company level and raising them up and dealing with them, right? And I think the same thing with data at the time. We're talking again, this is 2011, 2012, 2013, is that there's data from some of these systems, specifically Morty, we're talking about kind of our ticketing systems originally, right, for IT. And it was, all right, how do we get that in front of people's faces, right? That, a ticket is going to breach SLA, right? Or there's a certain amount of opportunities in the CRM, or accounts receivable are higher than they usually are. And so just getting the numbers in front of people, I think was super powerful. I think picking some KPIs that maybe just need to be the number 0, right? And make sure the number is always 0, right? If there's a number on here, this is wrong, and giving action. And I think Strety is kind of the bridge next, is like, all right, you have the numbers. What's the execution part, right? Like that's the kind of EOS framework world, right? Like there is something going on. How do we execute to solve this, right? Accounts receivable are high, right? Like, all right, then maybe that's a quarterly rock for someone in the accounts receivable department or accounting. And how are they going to improve it? And they're going to make a plan, and they're going to update that data over 90 days. And now, accounts receivable is maybe solved, or maybe it needs to be an issue for somebody else to help in the next quarter. And so that's sort of on the Strety world, is like, all right, we did the business intelligence thing. Now it flows into the execution. What happens after, right? How do we execute on these things? And how do we put processes?
So Roy, maybe help us bridge the gap, right? So we spoke about reporting, and then we spoke about, the numbers that tell a story. But I would imagine that many business owners are either too busy or can't really focus or don't really understand why the numbers are bad. So let's assume for a moment that my KPIs are what they should be for my business. How do I turn a number that's bad into either an issue that needs to be discussed, or how do I turn it into a series of to-dos or actions that need to be remedied?
So let's take the example of the accounts receivable, right? Aging, right? Obviously, cash flow in and out of an organization is hugely important. Cash on the street, right? If money is out in the street that you haven't collected, right, and that number that you're trending towards is not nowhere near your goal, there's an issue there, right? What's going on? Do you not have the right initiatives in place? Do you not have the right process in place to check on that cash flow that's out in the street? Because that's earned income, but it's not within your environment yet. And that's a problem. Every company, cash flow is king, right? You need to make sure you have a lifeline to continue operations, expansion, acquisition. So in that particular instance, let's say aging tends to creep up, and we, the company I was with previously 5-6 years ago, we went through this ourselves. Why was aging up? What were the actions that were not happening, right? What levers do we need to pull to ensure that aging number comes down, makes it more manageable towards the goal that where we're saying it's okay, having 50,000, 100,000 out is okay. Having 800,000 out there, or 1 million, 2 million out there, that's not acceptable. That's not a healthy way to build a business. When we look at that aging number, we dig deep. That's when you IDS, you identify, you discuss, and you solve. The identification is not that the number is not where it's supposed to be. What's going on behind those numbers? Is it personnel? Is it process? Are there specific instances that you need to look at? So, and then you problem solve for those root causes, which then what we feel can help, and what not we feel, which I have seen, helps remedy situations. You might have 2, 3, 4 IDS items that is related to that aging. But if you didn't have a process, all you'd be looking at is an aging number that's creeping up, going, I don't know what to do about this, right? get down to the root cause. And then the to-dos coming out of that might be you meet with the controller and go, I need you to pay close attention to this. I need you to quarterback these 3 or 4 or 5 accounts, right? I need you to make sure that the loop is closed between executions of production and customer service and client management to ensure that we continue to bring those items in.
So
hopefully that helps create a clear example for you, Mordy.
It does. I think so. And I appreciate that. I'll pivot right now to the idea of a ceiling. I think we've both spoken about this. We've all spoken about this. And what I'd like to speak to Larry about for just a moment is how do we identify when we are about to approach a ceiling? And Roy, I'm sure you're going to have something to say about that momentarily as well. But if we're identifying issues and solving them as business as usual, if you will, I think that ceilings, at least in my experience, are more complicated than just, oh, we have an issue, we need to solve this particular issue. It's a fundamental shift in the business between making $1 million to making $2.5 million, or making 5 or 7 million, wherever your revenue ceilings are. So maybe Larry, you have some insights over here that can help our listeners.
We always thought about ceilings sort of by components, right? And so we've always thought about it as like in the department, right? So at one point we were scaling up was we weren't getting people trained enough, right? And we can see that in like the customer satisfaction numbers, the net promoter scores. So there was some KPIs, and that was in a portion of our L10 meeting of like, oh, these are starting to get a little bit lower, right? And then we'd see churn numbers go up, et cetera. And so we did actually what Roy exactly said, like we IDS it, what's the problem here? And it's like, all right, we need to build up a customer success function. And so we converted one service rep into a success person, proactively reaching out to new customers and old customers to get them trained, keep them up to date. We always found that older customers were the ones that knew us the least. And so for us, it was just by components, right? I don't think we ever took like an overarching, like, all right, the company can't grow. It was like, all right, what department is hitting friction? And then we would try to solve there.
You would break it down into departmental ceilings as opposed to a company-wide ceiling. Yeah. Interesting. So I was always thinking about it from a corporate perspective. Roy, do you have any best practices that you would recommend to entrepreneurs?
In reference to hitting a ceiling or just in general?
Well, in reference to specifically identifying when you're about to hit a ceiling.
Yeah.
Most importantly, I think, is that knowing before you've hit the ceiling would probably be better than actually hitting the ceiling and then trying to figure out, okay, what the hell's going on?
Right. And so what we do, so what I suggest is this. One of the tools in EOS, which is very helpful, which gives you a clear, transparent look in the company, is the scorecard, right? When a scorecard is fully developed, you've got an executive scorecard that tells you overall growth, expansion strategy, market share, and then you've got individual department scorecards that tell you the health of a company. As Larry says, when you start to see numbers trending or actions trending in a direction where you don't hit it, right? We teach what we prescribe is something called, we teach our clients 5 leadership abilities. Have you hit a ceiling as a department? Have you hit a ceiling as an organization? Or have I, as a CEO, as a CTO, as a CIO, hit a ceiling in my individual role? Am I no longer effective? And if I'm not effective, what's going on, right? What is it that I'm not doing that I should be doing? What results am I not getting? So what we're trying to do is to get to simplify the approach. As Larry says, you compartmentalize, right? You look at it from a department. Simplify. What's the root cause of this feeling of hitting a ceiling? Is it me? Is it the company? Is it my department? And then to the extent that I can systemize this process, is there a process to help me break through the ceiling, right? Do we have the right processes in place? Do I have the right structure in place? Do I have the right support structure in place to help me break through that ceiling? Do I have the right people with the right skill set to help me break through that ceiling? So when you simplify and get down to the root cause, it really makes things, you oversimplify it because that's by design. What are we trying to accomplish here, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mordy.
Oh, I was going to just say that, firstly, you noted that simplicity is wonderful, and I'll agree there. I'll also note that from a complexity on an individual level, that the individual, him or herself, has hit their own personal ceiling, that resonates very, very strongly with me because I feel that way every day. Well, that was a joke. I guess that didn't land all that well.
You know,
That's not true,
there's
Mordy.
always truth in humor, right? And Morty, truthfully, a lot of owners feel like you do, right? They just don't feel comfortable admitting to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to the ability, and you don't have to go around being transparent and like, pouring your heart out, but in reflecting inwardly, what is it about me? I always say, like, when we point our fingers at someone, there's three pointed back at us. What are my actions, right? What can I do to better myself?
Mm.
And that's something actively as a manager that I've had to learn, leader, right? Executive leader over the last 15 years. What is my action? What can I do to help push the ball forward?
Go ahead,
Because
Larry.
sometimes I'm the blocker.
Sorry, go ahead. What were we going to say? Looked like you were about to say something, Larry.
No. I think I was just laughing about you saying that you've hit a ceiling.
I hit my ceiling every day. But go ahead.
No, I thought it was a great
Thank
joke.
you.
I loved it.
Thank you. I try. It doesn't always work, and sometimes it lands kind of poorly, but I work on it every day. It's one of these days I'm going to go and attend Chicago City Limits, or if that still exists. But self-improvement's a big deal. Self-improvement's a big deal. But before I go into self-improvement, I just want to note that on the KJ side, and perhaps this is obvious to anybody who is an entrepreneur but is also a technician in their business, that whatever it is that you're doing, the thing that you're doing, generally speaking, does have a ceiling. And as a technician, you know how to expand it. So my example would be, we worked with the number one company on the Inc. 500 a number of years back, and they scaled from, when we first worked with them, from 10 to over 400 employees, to be then purchased by a very large internet conglomerate later on. And the processes that we were doing needed to evolve really, really quickly. So there was almost no time for there to be a ceiling. You just needed to fix it, and you fixed it, and you fixed it, and you fixed it. So perhaps that's overly entrepreneurial and not process oriented. And then from the personality and personal growth side, I think that that's incredibly important, and that starts with self-awareness, but it also and it continues with education. So maybe Larry, speak about a number of books and or other tools that you would recommend for entrepreneurs to read, listen, learn.
Gosh, around books, I mean, there's an oldie but goodie, but how to God, is it How to Win Friends and Influence People? I mean, I love that Dale Carnegie book. I'm like rereading it now. I thought it was one of those like life transformational ones that like traction was for our business. That was for me. I remember reading it in college. Was massive for me. And I always liked, is it David Allen that does Getting Things Done? GTD. I think those two books. I mean, if I had I feel like that should be required reading for like college students getting out of college, regardless of what degree they're in there. But what I do love about your ceiling thing, more your joke, is like, if you are about to hit a ceiling, you just got to change the room, right? So if you do personal development and you move yourself and you go skill yourself up, you move over to the next room, that ceiling might be higher. So I think that's those are the two books that come to mind.
The opportunities there are infinite for all intents and purposes, right? Especially if you inject some sort of a spiritual overtone to the conversation, and that is, energetically, spiritually, however it is that you want to describe it. But, if we are of an infinite source, then we have infinite capacity. It's hard to see that sometimes.
100%. I'll say one thing. One of my favorite proverbs from the Old Testament is, where there is no vision, the people perish, right? And I think that applies not only at the company level, but at the individual level, right? If you don't have a vision for your life, connected to, the ultimate source of, religion, of theistic belief, I think that's so important to have that vision. How does it align with that?
And then growth starts there. And Roy, you and I have spoken about Feng Shui back in the day and a bunch of other things. So we don't really, I can't speak for anyone else. I don't really understand source and where that all comes from. But Roy, maybe you found a new challenge for yourself, and you said you reinvented yourself. And in a prior conversation, I believe you told me that this was the job that you were always meant to be doing.
Right.
Maybe speak about the process of discovery and how you found that path.
From a young age, I've always loved working with people. I've always been drawn to people trying to figure out, like, how do we get together collectively to an outcome? Equality and success and making sure inclusion was very important to me, right? It's ironic, I went to school for business psychology, but I ended up in tech. But I was given, thank you, to my mentors, to my former, the clients that I worked with, the companies that I worked with, I was always put in a position with a lot of autonomy to grow teams, right? To bring out the best in people, to bring cohesive teams together. I realized after after doing what I did for a number of years that my love was really into teaching, right? It was about there was a higher calling. When I shared with you, Mordy, I believe I'm truly doing what I was designed to do, which is to help companies be sustainable. When I think of a company, I go beyond just a visionary. There are lives, employees that rely on that company to provide them with a livelihood. Their families rely on that income, that child's soccer practice, that hospital bill, that young mom that has to probably deliver in a couple of months. They all rely on that company. So the calling that I have is help fix companies, help make companies sustainable, make them successful, make them places that people want to be a part of, right? And when companies are healthy, employees are healthy, owners are happy, leadership teams are happy. Magic happens when people are in alignment. Now, this isn't to say that everyone is right for the company. It's okay if a person, an employee, is not right for a company. You are holding them back from what they should be doing, right? Everyone has a calling. That's my true belief and my true purpose is to help people find their calling, to help companies to help companies be cohesive, collaborative. Because like I said, sustainable companies to me are where employees are happy, where it's sustainable. People are continuing to get paid. They're achieving great things together. We have one life to live. My faith is let's make it count.
That sounds really, really wonderful. And what I'll say is, it sounds like most of us have had a fork in the road and a change. And Larry, it's certainly from a teacher perspective, this sounds like you also had a change of direction in your career a couple of times, perhaps. So how did you find your way, and how would you recommend other people go about doing that?
I think just openness and vulnerability, right? I think I just had an open conversation with who's now my business partner, co-founder Brian at the time, that he was working on Brightgauge and commercializing it, and just saying, I'm open to these opportunities and sort of putting myself out there, I think is one. And I do think, by the way, I think, Roy, that the journey of being a teacher is incredible, right? My wife's a teacher, and her whole family are a bunch of educators. So being around that is incredible. And I do find a thought that in the future I'll return to it for sure. But I think just open vulnerability and being open to having discussions and learning, just being curious about what people do and learning that maybe that's a better fit, right? What's out there.
If Gino Wickman, who is the founder of EOS, is the father of EOS, then the grandfather of EOS would be Dan Sullivan, who's the founder and head of strategic coach for many, many years. He has lots of thought leadership stuff out there, which I've been listening to for years. And he speaks of something called a unique ability. And I would dare to say that the people on this podcast have found their unique ability. Perhaps we could speak a little bit about, for you, Roy, there are many EOS implementers, but yet you do it in your own way, even though you do it in the pure way. How do you bring unique Roy Peter into a very structured framework?
Firstly, when I first considered being an EOS implementer, going into the community, someone warned me, I have to warn you, you're going to think it's like a cult. Every EOS implementer I have met, every single one, we've got a total of over 700 of them. They're incredible in their own way. They're amazing. Their experiences, what they've accomplished, what they've done, they're amazing. And we all teach EOS pure. What defines us is our life experiences, right? Each of us has had a different life experiences, different challenges we've had to overcome, right? I would be pressed to say that you would be blessed to work with any EOS implementer because they're all excellent, and EOS does an excellent job of vetting their implementers, right? We live by our core values, right? We live, when I say we live by our core values, we do the right thing all the time. We help first. We are humbly confident, right? So the what I'm saying is I can't say that anything really completely separates me from my other fellow implementer brothers or sisters, other than the fact that I might have different life experiences. I might have viewed life differently through my lenses, through my challenges and through my successes. That's the only thing that separates me. But truly, as implementers, we try not to really make a clear distinction because, we're all good at what we do. And there's an abundance of opportunities for everyone. And if you have that mindset, your whole life changes. And I truly subscribe to that mindset. I'm blessed to be a part of a great community.
Thank you, Roy. Larry, I have a very similar question for you. And you can take this in a couple of different ways. And if you do both, I'd appreciate it. Number one, on the personal front, how do you find your own unique ability in these businesses? But also, there are multiple companies that do EOS tools. What makes Strety special?
For us, on the first one, it's unique abilities. I just try to be my true self. I love having conversations with clients and prospects, and I love just being part of building great software as a craft as opposed to, a monetary gain, right? So building something that's helpful at a fair price, right? That's always kind of been our philosophy, even with the Brightgauge days. And then myself, sorry, Mordy, can you repeat the second part? What was the second part on that?
Strety in itself is...
How is it different?
Yeah.
That's right. So how's it different? There's a couple different ones. EOS has their own EOS One, which is a wonderful product. Mark O'Donnell over there has done a great job on that and spearheading that. There's 90, which is another licensed one within user terminology, and that's a fantastic software. They've been around for a long time. And Bloom is another one that's sort of EOS compatible, like we are, right? You can run the framework, but there is going to be nomenclature change. For us, we bet pretty heavily on the Microsoft world. So very embedded into that. And we really want to be the most integrated, right? And by integration, we don't mean one directional, right? Not you do something in Strety and it gets sent somewhere, and that's great. We want it to be bidirectional, meaning sending it over there, but it comes back into Strety, meaning if I go send that to a ticketing platform or I go send that to Asana, I send that to Microsoft To Do, that when it gets closed out in those platforms, it automatically closes back, right? And that takes a little bit more software architecture. So that's something that we strive for. And then we have other visions around, the employee, right? More around performance management that, sits a little bit at the edge of sort of an operating system. And we'll, develop sort of towards that direction and just continue building and really taking feedback from our customers. So I would say is very Microsoft focused, and then very focused in, the holistic, right? Sort of from an employee onboarding to an offboarding, but from a company starting up to a company that scales to 400 users and has different challenges that we can provide a solution.
And you love building software and building software at a fair price.
We do. We do, yeah.
That sounds wonderful to me as an entrepreneur, being able to get software at a fair price. Man, wow, where do I sign up?
Yeah.
So that's been really, really great. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the end or the beginning of our journey, right? So entrepreneurs, we all are going to leave our business one way or another. Hopefully it's on our own terms. Sometimes it's not. But Larry, you have an experience with having done an exit, and hopefully there'll be success in the current venture. Speak to us for a little bit about how you plan for, start thinking about, and guided your business towards the exit, and what was important in that process?
That was sort of unique, right? I think even when we exited, we 2 months prior, before we started entertained opportunity, we actually weren't even thinking about it, right? We were already started thinking about other things we built. I think that was something that just the market approached us, right, and said, hey, here's the exit. At the time, my co-founder now, Brian, and his brother Eric They both had been in the game for a long time, and it was an opportunity for life-changing experience. So we did it. But I think a big thing for us has always been take care of the employees, regardless of what the monetary exit is. Like, do we put them in a better position? So we distributed a lot to the employee base at Brightgauge, after the exit. So I think that's a massive thing. We love who we work with. We're very loyal people as far as that goes. And again, for us, it isn't a plan. I think we just wait for like the market to come to us as far as an exit goes. So probably not the answer you're expecting, but that's sort of we never
No,
planned for it.
I think it's
And
a wonderful answer in the sense that you're not necessarily shopping the company around, which means that you're building it with a future in mind. But by the same token, it sounds like what you're saying is that because you've built on a framework, you didn't need to fix anything before the exit.
That's correct. Yeah, that was. I think the people that bought us at Continue were pretty shocked about how good the operations were. They were very confident that once the company got taken over, it'd be very easy to plug and play. And I would say this is a huge advertisement. I would say for EOS and EOS implementers is this. I bet you companies get another 1 to 2x multiple on their sales by having that framework in place, as opposed to sort of a by the gut operating system that an owner might have it sells, right? Some people buy and have to fix a bunch of operational things. I bet you, I mean, I don't know if that's studied, Roy, you tell me, but I feel like that's a big advertisement for implementers and EOS worldwide at large, is just getting that extra 1 to 2x from having the framework.
Yeah, what do you think, Roy?
So I've heard this from many M&A people and private equity people, like clients or advisors, that they love EOS because of the repeatability of the success, right? As companies that are looking to exit, one of the first things that they do is, do you have a repeatable process? Is it clearly defined, right? Or are you simply selling a brand? Because if there's no repeatable success, what's the ROI going to be on their investment, right? So that's one of the things that EOS is well known for, is creating that scalability to ensure that it's repeatable and that there's a future for it.
The scalability of a business is dependent on the repeatability, Roy. 100%. Is that what you mean?
Yep.
So if I have the ability to pull individuals out for either good things like promotions or bad things, we didn't talk about the right person, right seat business, but right. We can get to that momentarily, or because we're completely going to be taking this business and changing the direction of its long-term ownership, then it almost sounds like there would be having a process by which you run the business would be a tremendous value.
100%. Right. And Mordy, if it's okay, I'd like to speak to this, right? Each of our companies, each one that we've been involved in, has core processes, a way of doing things. It's what makes us successful. If we're not deliberate and clear in terms of documenting those processes and capturing that information and ensuring that it's being followed by all, because every one of us has a core processes, to the extent that we can document them at a high level and ensure that we create a playbook of how things are done or how it should be done, and ensure that our teams are understanding of it and abiding by it, complying by it, or at least asking for revisions, because maybe processes evolve, they change. It's the best way to test a process, right? You're continuously getting better. When you have a playbook of how you run your business and how business is done, you remove the guesswork out of it, right? And so trying to figure out, like, is this, when things happen, when you hit a ceiling, are you following the right established processes? Are you not following the processes? Is it a right person, right seat issue? Do you have a person who doesn't understand their role, who doesn't understand the process? Or maybe the process no longer works. As companies evolve and grow, processes need to change, right?
So that, Larry, sounds like having a tool that allows you, I think these were your words, to bring the sunshine into the situation. So if we can bring sunshine into a process, that would be very, very helpful, I would imagine. I'll ask the question like this. We're obviously recording a podcast. Many people are now familiar with all kinds of online tools that people are using. And Larry, you mentioned that you were living in the Microsoft ecosystem predominantly, and I think your tool is integrated into Microsoft Teams. Maybe speak for us for a moment on how you arrived at deciding that Microsoft Teams was the tool for Strety's future, and for other people who may be thinking about similar types of activities, what other ideas came into what other factors presented themselves in the process for making said decision?
Yeah, I think it's app fatigue, right? If you think of a decade ago, we were building Brightgauge. We were kind of one of the first SaaS platforms that a lot of our customers had. There were a lot of on-premise things, but now they tell us, hey, we're logging into 35 different applications, right, on average. And so there was a big fatigue part in there. And that was kind of like, all right, why don't we build where people are already, right? Where they're comfortable, they're having conversations and all that. I think even though I think Slack gets a lot of shine, there's a good amount of Microsoft Teams users. And again, it's sort of our roots of IT managed service providers. So it kind of lives in that world anyways. 95% of them are, Microsoft, companies. But the app fatigue was a big thing, right? Live where they already communicate and then meet where they already are and integrate in there. So that was a big portion.
So I think that that's a big lesson, not just for software. You've got to meet the customer where they are. And if your customer is doing something that's completely antithetical to the way you think they should be doing it, I guess a conversation should be had about that. So Larry, does that mean that there would be no Slack integration or future for Strety, or am I allowed to even ask that?
Yeah, there will be in Q3. So we've just gotten more and more customers that have come in here and just using email and password as opposed to Microsoft single sign-on. So we're getting taken there by the market, but we've been sort of waiting for that, and it's arrived for us. So there'll be a Gmail single sign-on, integration into Google Tasks and Slack in Q3, maybe into Q4. Now, mind you, the development team's going to kill me and tar and feather me because you're never supposed to talk about deadlines at all, ever. This is a decade of wounds on here, but I feel great about that.
And I'm excited for that, because that means that from a philosophical standpoint, what we just looked at was the ability to understand that we met the customers where they're at, but by the same token, we're also skating to where the puck is going.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll say that from the KJ side, that's a big core value of ours. To shamelessly steal Wayne Gretzky's line about skating where the puck is going is important to us, because technology, as all three of us are keenly aware, changes radically every 18 months and even more radically every 36 months. So if I were to say that KJ is on KJ 13.0, I don't think I'd be lying at this point. So it almost sounds like, Roy, that EOS has more of a timeless approach than, say, which tools and how we go about things, more on the technology front.
Absolutely. We'd like to say that, the principles of EOS have been around for hundreds of years. They'll be around for thousands more, right? It's very simplistic in its fashion, and it's very foundational in its teaching. Right. So that is why when we say it, I always get a chuckle when I say I truly am industry agnostic. I myself support clients in 9 different industries.
Wow.
Okay. And so when clients ask me, like, how is it when you have a hospitality group as opposed to a psychotherapy service, how are they different? I said, they have similar issues. Mm-hmm. They've got similar challenges and opportunities to explore. Right. And that's because the foundation of the principles are very similar, right? There are no magic bullets, as we say. There's no magic bullets. There's no pills that you can take that are going to solve your issues. It's foundational in its approach.
Larry, I think maybe you and I are a little bit more similar than Roy. Roy is teaching timeless principles, and you and I in the day-to-day need to deal with tools that become deprecated and all kinds of cybersecurity issues that are related to self-hosting or not self-hosting and so on. How do you think about the ever-evolving world of technology?
I mean, it's incredible. It's like, we had Clippy. Now Clippy's back. It's called Copilot, right? It's a little bit, it's older and more mature,
That
but it's,
is the best
it's the
line
same
ever. Oh
thing,
my
right?
God.
And we had it. It comes, like you said, it's evolving revolution. I could not sell someone on cloud in 2013. They're like, I don't trust it, right? And then now it's funny. I'm starting to hear people like, hey, what are the chances I can get this on premise? It's like, what? We're going back to on premise? Like, yeah, on premise is starting to get, I'm beginning to hear it. And that means, like you said, in 36
Wow.
months, everyone's going to have their microservers and be like, nah, you need to sell me an on-premise version
That's
of this software.
fascinating.
And especially with AI and stuff like that, that if you start putting AI into these machines, instead of going to the internet, they're going to want to compute inside of a machine. Like I'm not shocked. Like, exactly. Roy's living here in Millennium, and you and I are just, if we can get 18 months of like the same thing, we're pretty happy.
I'll note that the other thing that I'm a very big believer in is my own pendulum theory. I don't know if anyone else has spoken about this, but for insourcing versus outsourcing, particularly in the large companies, I really find that it goes in complete and total cycles. So at one point, everybody's like, yeah, got to outsource that. Yeah, that's not our core business. We're going to outsource that. Ooh, that costs too much money. Everybody in-house. Bring everybody in-house. Oh, no. We got to outsource it. And that happens over and over and over and over again. Excuse me. Those, I think, are just the funny cycles of human beings. And I guess some things are timeless and some things, again, for quoting the Old Testament, we can say that it's there's no new things under the sun.
True.
Roy, maybe let's bring this to a conclusion. I know that we've spoken a lot about EOS and we've spoken a lot about, implementers. Maybe speak a little bit about, in closing, what should an entrepreneur think about? Why would they engage you or, the framework and how would they go about doing that?
So I would strongly suggest, when an entrepreneur is faced with a challenge, maybe he doesn't recognize it's a challenge, right? Maybe the entrepreneur is working 6-7 days a week, and he's waking up in a panic at 3 o'clock. Stuff is bothering him, right? There's just no peace. Entrepreneurship can be fun. You started it for a passion. You started doing what you're doing because you wanted to provide a product or a service, and you're better than other people. That's why people kept coming back to you. You can get back to doing that, right? Because as your business grows and complexity increases and you have to delegate your responsibilities and your goals change, your market shares change, there is a method to the madness. Why reinvent the wheel when there is a system that works, right? Now, is it for everyone? No. So what I would recommend is, one, try to listen to good business books, right? When you're stuck, listen to what applies to you. Michael Gerber's E-Myth is a great book. Patrick Lencioni has put out a ton of books, right? In addition to Stephen Covey, Dan Sullivan, they're all great authors. The information is out there. In order for your business to improve, like you said, you have to improve. You've got to really dig deep and see, where are the problems? Is it me? Do I no longer enjoy doing what I'm doing? Is it somewhere else in my company? Is there a trust issue? Now, is EOS right for every company? Like I said, it might not be. But I invite you. You can get traction off of Amazon. You can get a grip off of Amazon. Read those books. At the very least, you'll pick 2 or 3, 4, 5 concepts that you might like, right? And then if you're interested in talking to an implementer, go right ahead. But if you take those 3, 4, 5 concepts and apply them in your business and it helps you, great. That's what we suggest.
That's great. And how can people reach out to you?
They can reach out to me through my website, through EOS Worldwide /Roy Peter. So it's eosworldwide.com/Roy-Peter. Or, they can also reach out to me through my company, WeBuildTeamsInc.com. We Build Teams operates EOS, and we teach EOS to our clients.
Thank you so much, Roy. Larry, how do people, any closing thoughts, and how do people reach out to Strety and, if appropriate, to you directly?
Yeah, I think I wish it was simple enough for me to tell someone I command you to grow, but it doesn't work that way, right? I think it takes a little bit of discipline, and we want to be sort of that Sherpa, right? That business operating software that helps you align things internally. So if we can go make you, help less stress, help you improve your processes, put them in place, do things that are integrated and do the right things at the right time. We want to be there on the journey with you. And people can reach me at lgarcia at strety.com. And then, yeah, that's if we can be part of your journey as a small SMB or medium-sized business, we'd love to have that opportunity.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you so much, Roy. I am privileged to have this wonderful conversation with the both of you. This was really, really, really great. I want to thank our sponsor, KJ Technology. KJ Technology is an IT services and advisory firm. It provides cybersecurity guidance as well as managed services for small to medium businesses. We also function very heavily in the family office space. If you have any questions about your technology security, please feel free to reach out to us, info@kjtechnology.com. Thank you so much. And I appreciate my guests, Roy and Larry, for being with us today on episode 8, Sustainable Scaling of Ventures and Visionaries. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe.